The A129 Mangusta attack helicopter provides top-tier close air support for the Italian tech tree in War Thunder. Let's check it out. Back in the 1970s, a lot of countries were evaluating the future of combat helicopters in their military doctrine, following the American experience in the Vietnam War, and Italy was no different. They decided that a dedicated attack and observation helicopter was going to be needed, and the original plans for this involved cooperation with West Germany, but that partnership fell apart pretty fast. The Augusta company started development in the late 1970s, and in '83, the first A129 prototype took to the air, which led to an immediate production order from the Italian Army. The flight performance was state-of-the-art, and its weapon system was quite modern by 1980 standards, with the helicopter immediately drawing pretty favorable comparisons to the AH-64 Apache. Now, Augusta tried to market the helicopter internationally, but no customers materialized until decades later. This was, however, the first dedicated attack helicopter developed and produced entirely in Europe, and entered regular service with the Italian Army in 1990. It ended up being deployed to a number of different theaters in support of UN operations, and it supported the Italian deployment to Iraq. By the end of the 1990s, Augusta had merged with the Westland Company, and the A129 was upgraded to the CBT version, which became the standard combat model for Italian service. A few other derivatives were proposed, but the only one that ended up getting produced was the T129, which is a Turkish version with some pretty significant differences. A total of 60 Mangustas were produced, serving exclusively with the Italian Army, but its future is already limited, as the development of a replacement was announced in 2017. What we get in War Thunder is the A129 CBT, that's the upgraded version, an Italian attack helicopter in Rank 7 at Battle Rating 10.0. This helicopter has a very advanced weapon system, with a full ballistics computer, night vision, thermal sights, a laser designator, a pretty strong optical zoom, an auto tracker, and both a radar and laser warning receiver. It also gets an IRCM system and a pretty decent supply of flares and chaff. In short, the Mangusta has almost every helicopter system currently in the game. For weapons, it has a chin-mounted 20mm cannon turret, which actually ends up being a bit more useful than you might think, along with an enormous number of loadout options with missiles, rockets, and gun pods in dozens of different combinations. Seriously, the quantity of loadouts this helicopter gets is crazy, and if the snail is watching, really guys, switch this thing over to the custom loadouts as soon as you can. Now for air-to-air missiles, there are two options: the familiar AIM-92 Stinger and the Mistral. Both of these are all-aspect infrared missiles with reasonably good performance, with the Mistral being a little bit better overall. But there's a snag. They fire downwards. They're mounted on the stub wings at a downward angle, so you have to pitch backwards to lock their seeker, which can be a little awkward in the heat of combat. For air-to-ground missiles, there are a few different options. The A129 gets two versions of the BGM-71 tow missile. These are both wire-guided weapons, which count as semi-automatic command line of sight in the game, and both have kind of a limited range. The D model flies faster and hits harder, and while you're spading the helicopter, you're probably going to get a lot of use out of these missiles, again, with the D model being a bit better overall. The top-end weapon you get is the AGM-114B Hellfire laser-guided anti-tank missile. The Hellfire features an inertial guidance phase, so if you fire it off from longer ranges, it'll do that pop-up attack move, and it'll come down on a target from a higher angle. And in general, It's got a really strong warhead with good armor penetration and 9 kilograms of explosive. Now, in terms of its flight performance, the A129 is just amazing. It has exceptional agility, with a strong cyclic response and a quick tail rotor, giving snap rotation better than a lot of other helicopters. What that means in practice is that the Mangusta is maneuverable in forward flight, and it can turn on a dime at slow speeds or in a hover. Additionally, this thing's pretty fast, and combined with its great control, you can move around really well even below treetop level, scooting around the battlefield from one firing position to another without any trouble. Flying the Mangusta out as close air support can make you forget that this thing's only at battle rating 10.0, until somebody shoots at you, but more on that in a minute. The helicopter's weapon system is incredibly effective, so you can basically fly any kind of helicopter mission you want. You can do the early game rocket runs, or even later game rocket runs, with complete credibility, and even just using its cannon if you want to, or if you run out of ammo. Now, the normal helicopter meta remains just to do standoff missile attacks from beyond 3 or 4 kilometers off outside the edge of the battlefield, and this works just as well with the A129 as it does with any other top-end attack helicopter. The combination of the Hellfire missiles, thermal sights, and the strong optical zoom give you the tools to cause some serious problems for enemy tanks from medium to long range. And if you've got the patience, you can generally get at least 2 to 4 kills without a large amount of difficulty. But being effective in the helicopter meta involves a lot of waiting around and just repositioning between shots, which isn't very interesting to watch, so I'm only showing a little bit of that here. If you want to risk flying in close, the unguided rockets are completely capable of knocking out tanks on a direct hit, and the 20mm cannon in the chin turret is surprisingly effective. You can take out lighter targets like a BMP in barely a second or two of fire, and it can even take out medium tanks with a sustained burst from a good angle. The catch is, you've got to get up close and personal to use it, and that's pretty risky. The A129, for all of its strengths, doesn't react well to incoming fire, and it's actually pretty easy to shoot this thing down. Now, it's got a good supply of countermeasures, but in my experience, cannons and gunfire from the ground are going to be the biggest risk, and even just a couple of glancing hits can be enough to disable or destroy the Mangusta. It's a bit of a glass cannon. Visually, the A129 is, I think, a pretty good-looking helicopter. Even at a quick glance, this thing was really obviously designed for combat, and it's pretty distinct from a lot of the other helicopters in the game, which trace their lineage back to, like, civilian utility choppers. You only get one paint job, solid black, which isn't really a bad thing, since a flat paint job makes it a little easier to decorate with decals and stuff. Overall, the Mangusta looks pretty badass. Now, landing this helicopter is basically the same as other wheeled helicopters. It has a fixed gear, but it can tend to roll around a bit after setting down, so if you don't land in hover mode, you're going to have to manually handle your pitch as you lock up the brakes. Be careful. To close out on the A129 CBT Mangusta attack helicopter. This thing has an amazing top-end weapon system, with good missiles for targeting both air and ground targets. Its gun turret is actually useful. It has a good supply of countermeasures, and it has exceptional agility. However, it's kinda fragile, and its air-to-air missiles are aimed downwards, which isn't great. The final verdict on the A129 CBT is that honestly, this helicopter feels a bit under-tiered. I would argue that this is the best attack helicopter in the game at battle rating 10.0 or lower, and even going up to 10.3, only the Japanese AH-64 DJP can compete with it. If you're good at the helicopter meta of, the whole shoot and scoot gameplay out from a distance, the only thing that's going to hold you back on your kill count is the ammo load you can carry. Just don't get shot at, because this thing's kinda made out of glass. As always, thanks for watching.